We are in Egypt, around the year 2570 before Christ, in the midst of the fourth dynasty of the Old Kingdom. Before us stretches the Giza Plateau, a horizon of stone and sand where the rising sun slowly lifts, spilling golden light over the desert. The air still holds the coolness of night, but it will soon turn scorching. In the distance, the Nile River winds like a blue vein that gives life to all that exists. Its calm waters mirror the sky of a world that still believes the gods walk among men. It is a morning like any other for the thousands of workers living in the camps at the foot of the plateau. But for us, traveling through time, this sunrise marks the beginning of one of the greatest feats in human history, the construction of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. A project that will not only change Egypt's landscape, but also the way we understand the ambition, faith, and ingenuity of a civilization. Before we go on, I'm very curious to know from where in the world and at what time you're joining tonight. I'd love to read you in the comments. This journey will be long, full of discoveries, and I'd like us to walk it together, like explorers of the past who watch and wonder at what our ancestors were capable of. The sun climbs a little higher, and life begins to awaken completely. The sound of metal striking stone echoes in the distance. Copper hammers, chisels, and ropes form a rhythmic symphony that accompanies the workers' awakening. Men gather in organized crews. Their bodies are covered in dust, but their eyes reflect a blend of effort and pride. Among the adobe houses of the workers' settlements, women prepare bread and beer, the staple that will keep the thousands who labor on this colossal work on their feet. The air fills with the smell of toasted grain and sweat, mixed with the desert's dry wind. If we close our eyes, we can imagine the murmur of conversations, the creak of the sled's wood, and the hiss of wind dragging sand between stone walls. This place is not just a work site. It's a temporary city that breathes to the rhythm of construction. Pharaoh Khufu, or Khufu as the Egyptians called him, watches the plateau from his palace in Memphis, the capital. He is about 30 years old and has a dream that transcends his life: to raise a perfect monument that will secure his passage to eternity. In his mind, the pyramid already exists. It is a symbol of power and faith, a bridge between the world of men and the realm of the gods. For Khufu, this construction is not a work of stone, but a spiritual machine that will guarantee his rebirth beside Ra, the sun god. The priests of the temple at Heliopolis have calculated the astronomical alignments with precision. Every angle, every orientation, every measure obeys a worldview in which nothing is accidental. In ancient Egypt, cosmic order, Ma'at, had to be reflected in every human action, and the pyramid would be its purest manifestation, a mountain of stone that imitates the primordial hill from which the gods created the world. Egyptian society is at its height. Agriculture flourishes thanks to the Nile's floods, and surplus grain allows labor to be freed for monumental projects. This is not, as has sometimes been imagined, a mass of chained slaves. Most workers are peasants who, during the flood seasons, join the royal crews. In return, they receive food, clothing, and a prestige passed down from generation to generation. Taking part in the pharaoh's work is an honor, an act of devotion that brings the common man closer to divinity. Imagine walking among them. The ground trembles beneath the sleds that drag multi-ton stone blocks. Every movement requires coordination, strength, and technique. A foreman sets the tempo with a staff, and the men pull the ropes in unison, chanting songs that help keep the cadence. The sound of their voices mingles with the wind and the murmur of tools. The landscape of Giza, which today seems motionless and eternal to us, was then a hive of activity. On the horizon rise earthen ramps, mounds of cut stone, and canals that link the Nile with the quarries. Boats bring granite from Aswan, alabaster from Hatnub, copper from Sinai. All Egypt seems to set itself in motion to serve the pharaoh's purpose. Each region contributes something: stone, wood, food, or human force. It is a national effort, almost a collective work of faith. As the day advances, the sun becomes relentless. Shadows vanish, and the heat makes the air shimmer. Men cover themselves with linen cloths, and overseers move among the groups offering fresh water and bread. The workdays are long, but the organization is meticulous. Each crew has its specific task. Some cut, others polish, others move. And at the center of it all, a team of engineers directs the project's initial layout, the base of the pyramid. There, on the bedrock of the plateau, the builders mark the monument's first limits. The surface is leveled with a precision that surprises even modern engineers, a deviation of barely a few millimeters. The Egyptians lacked advanced technology, but they had a deep knowledge of geometry, astronomical observation, and the use of simple tools. Their wisdom was practical, born of centuries of experience and a mindset that united science and religion into a single thought. When the sun begins to descend, the light takes on a reddish tone. The workers return to their villages, and the desert falls silent again. But something has changed. In the carved stone and in the accumulated effort of that day already beats the seed of eternity. No one knows it yet, but that first layout will mark the start of a legacy that will outlive empires, wars, and entire civilizations. The wind rises over Giza, lifting clouds of dust that swirl in the air as if the desert itself were breathing. Night will bring rest, the stars, and the murmur of the Nile. And under that same sky, thousands of years later, we still gaze upon the same scene, trying to understand how, why, and to what purpose a people decided to defy time. As the last glow of the day fades over the sands of Giza, a new figure begins to take shape among the shadows. The man who will make it possible to turn the pharaoh's dream into stone. On Egypt's throne sits Khufu, or Khufu, as the hieroglyphs name him. His face is lost to time, but his presence is still felt, powerful and distant, like a shadow crossing the centuries. Heir to Sneferu, the great innovator of pyramids, Khufu grew up among tales of conquests, temples, and constructions meant to bring man closer to the gods. Yet there is something different in him, an ambition that exceeds even the bounds of tradition. He is not content to repeat his father's glory. He wishes to surpass it, to leave his mark on stone and on eternity. Egypt, under his rule, lives an age of splendor. The country is rich, powerful, and its organization is so perfect it seems a living organism. From the northern delta to the mines of Nubia, every citizen knows his place in the divine order. The pharaoh is not a mere ruler. He is the incarnation of the god Horus on earth, the mediator between men and the cosmic forces that keep the universe in balance. When Khufu speaks, it is as if the gods themselves were doing so through his voice. But that power is not only political or religious, it is also profoundly symbolic. In the Egyptian mindset, everything that exists must reflect the harmony of the cosmos. Architecture is not an expression of beauty, but of sacred order. And so, when Khufu orders his pyramid built, he seeks not simply a tomb, but an axis of the world, a juncture between heaven and earth. His pyramid will be a physical manifestation of Ma'at, the universal principle that represents justice, balance, and truth. To understand his decision, one must imagine the world through that man's eyes. From the royal palace in Memphis, the Nile stretches like a shining artery, and around it flourish villages, temples, and canals. The river's annual floods ensure fertility, and with each cycle, Egypt is reborn, like the sun at dawn. For Khufu, that eternal repetition of natural order is not a mere phenomenon. It is proof the gods have granted the pharaoh the duty to maintain the universe's harmony. The pyramid will be his offering to that mission. On the palace walls, scribes inscribe decrees on papyri. One of them establishes the start of preparations for a monumental work west of Memphis. There, where the sun dies each afternoon, the great funerary monument will rise. The Egyptians believed the West was the abode of the dead, the place to which the soul must travel to be reborn beside the god Ra. That is why all necropolises were set on the Nile's western bank, and Giza offered the ideal plateau, firm, elevated, bathed in the light of sunset. The priests interpret signs, observe the stars, and determine the exact point where the base must be raised. According to them, the monument's layout must not only follow the principles of geometry, but also the movements of the sky. Each face of the pyramid will align with a cardinal point, each axis with a solar path. Thus, when the sun sets, its light will graze the stone as if marking the doorway to the beyond. Khufu supervises every decision with an almost obsessive precision. Though pharaohs often delegated to their viziers and architects, he personally takes part in the foundational rituals. He is not moved by impatience, but by an absolute faith in his destiny. His voice is deep, his presence imposing, and the priests attribute to him a gaze capable of inspiring devotion and fear in equal measure. Under his command, Egypt becomes a beehive of activity. In the quarries, laborers extract limestone with copper tools. In the workshops, artisans craft measuring instruments, braided ropes, and rudimentary plans on papyrus. Scribes record every delivery of materials, every workday, every offering to the temple. The project's magnitude demands an administration without precedent. 10,000 men laboring for decades, fed, housed, and coordinated with mathematical precision. And yet, despite his absolute power, Khufu is not remembered fondly in ancient texts. Centuries later, the Greeks will portray him as a tyrant, a severe and haughty man who forced his people to work for his glory. But that image, tinted by a foreign gaze, does not fully reflect reality. In the Egypt of the Old Kingdom, the pharaoh's authority was not oppressive, but sacred. The men who took part in his work did not consider themselves slaves, but collaborators in the divine order. To serve the pharaoh was to serve the cosmos. Khufu's court shines with splendor. Musicians, scribes, mathematicians, and astronomers coexist in an environment where knowledge and religion intertwine. It is known that under his reign, the first proportional calculations to measure angles and slopes were developed, and that the priests of Heliopolis perfected stellar observation. Every discovery, every idea, was put at the service of the greater work. The pyramid would not only be his tomb, but also a laboratory of astronomical and symbolic precision, an encyclopedia in stone that summed up the kingdom's wisdom. Meanwhile, the populace regards the Giza Plateau as a sanctuary under construction. The peasants who come to work there know they will not live to see the monument finished, but that does not matter to them. Their reward lies in collective transcendence, in being part of something greater than themselves. Families settle in provisional villages around the site. Supply routes, ovens, bakeries, hospitals, and minor temples are created. Little by little, an entire city arises from the desert, a city devoted to building eternity. Khufu watches with satisfaction the progress of his architects. At his side, one man stands out among the rest. His nephew, Hemiunu, vizier and great supervisor of the royal works. He will be the one to translate the pharaoh's vision into calculations, plans, and measurements. Between them, a bond of trust and shared destiny is forged. Hemiunu knows his name will be etched beside the pharaoh's if he achieves the impossible, to erect the most perfect structure the world has ever seen. Priests hold ceremonies every new moon, invoking the god's protection over the work. In nearby temples, sacred animals are sacrificed and wine is poured in honor of Ptah, the creator god and patron of builders. Every stone laid is consecrated with prayers. The laborers, though exhausted, feel part of a divine act. Nights in Giza are full of fire, music, and murmurs. The desert, lit by torches, seems an inverted firmament. Thousands of lights reflecting the stars that inspired the pharaoh's dream. Sometimes, in the stillness before dawn, Khufu pauses to watch the sky. He contemplates the constellation of Orion, symbol of the god Osiris, and the belt of stars the priests associate with the dwelling of deceased kings. Perhaps, in those moments, he imagines his own soul traveling among them, ascending the ramp of stone that now exists only in his mind. His ambition is not arrogance. It is conviction. He truly believes he is building a gateway to the beyond, a promise that will keep the harmony of the universe alive. Thus, at the heart of a powerful and devout kingdom, is born the idea that will forever mark human history. A dream conceived by a pharaoh who looked to the sky and saw in it his destiny. As the sun sets over the palace of Memphis, a young architect sharpens his tools. Soon, his name will resonate alongside the pharaohs as the maker of the impossible. In the throbbing heart of the royal work, amid the desert's dust and the Nile's murmur, a figure emerges who embodies the union of science, faith, and ambition. Hemiunu, Khufu's chief architect. Nephew to the pharaoh, vizier of the realm, and supervisor of all works, Hemiunu is more than a builder. He is the translator of a divine dream into stone. From his mind will come the calculations that make the impossible possible, raising a structure of more than 2 million blocks, aligned with the stars, that will withstand the passing of millennia. In the workshop set beside the plateau, Hemiunu surveys the terrain with an analytical gaze. Before him, the immensity of the desert seems to challenge any human attempt to master it. Yet his mind is clear, almost serene. With simple instruments, ropes, plumb lines, wooden squares, he measures, traces, compares. The knowledge he holds comes from generations of observers of sky and earth. In Egypt, engineering is not taught in schools. It is transmitted as a sacred inheritance, born of experience, observation, and devotion. The architect knows that the key to everything lies in the base. If the foundation is not perfect, the entire pyramid will be lost. So he orders the ground leveled until a surface is achieved so precise that, thousands of years later, archaeologists will still marvel at its exactitude, a deviation of less than 2 centimeters across the whole footprint. To accomplish it, the engineers dig channels around the perimeter and fill them with water, using the liquid's natural level as reference. The sun burns, men sweat, but patience is the first tool of every Egyptian builder. Imagine the scene. Under the glare of midday, dozens of scribes record figures on tablets, foremen shout instructions, and Hemiunu walks among them with a roll of papyrus under his arm. Sometimes he stops, watches the horizon, and notes something in silence. In his mind, the pyramid already exists. He sees its smooth faces reflecting light, its apex touching the sky, its hidden passageways beneath the stone mass. Every calculation, every line he draws, is a promise to the pharaoh and to the gods. The project, however, is not a simple construction. It is an enterprise of monumental logistics, where everything, from food to stone, must flow like a steady river. Thousands of workers are organized into shifts and crews. Each group has its name, its symbol, and its motto, sometimes carved into the stones they place. The drunkards of Menkaura, the friends of Khufu, the sons of Ra. Those names, proudly inscribed, still survive today, mute witnesses to the workers' camaraderie. Hemiunu oversees the supply chain. Limestone quarried from the nearby Tura quarries, granite brought from Aswan, and basalt for the floors of the funerary temple. Each block weighs several tons and demands precise planning. Wooden sleds glide over wetted tracks to reduce friction, and barges travel along canals that link the Nile to the construction site. all Egypt becomes a coordinated machine, driven by a blend of science, faith, and discipline. The architect is also a man of ritual. Before the first block is laid, ceremonies are held to consecrate the site. The priests of Ptah, god of craftsmen and creator of the world through the word, bless the tools and mark reference points with red pigment. Offerings are laid at the future monument's corners: bread, beer, incense, and figurines of tutelary gods. Engineering and spirituality intertwine without contradiction. For the Egyptians, to build was to pray. On the hardest days, Hemunu finds refuge in the shade of a tent where he keeps his plans and models. There, on limestone tables, rest papyri with his calculations, wooden models representing the inner chambers, and diagrams of ramps and corridors. The precision with which he works amazes even his contemporaries. In an age without iron or pulleys, he manages to design a system that will raise multi-ton blocks to dozens of meters in height. Though the exact methods have been lost, everything indicates he used inclined ramps, whether frontal or spiral, combined with counterweights and sleds. The slope had to be gentle, long enough to allow the ascent of the blocks without fracturing them. Men pulled with ropes while others poured water over the sand to harden it. Every meter gained upward was a victory, one more step toward the pharaoh's immortality. Night in Giza offers respite. Under a sky saturated with stars, Hemunu watches Orion and the Great Bear, the constellations that will guide the monument's orientation. The priests taught him that the stars' arrangement reflects the god's order, and that if the pyramid aligns with them, so will the pharaoh's soul on its eternal journey. With rudimentary instruments, a simple mast, a cord, and a T-shaped bar, he determines the cardinal points with astonishing precision. The pyramid's faces will be aligned almost exactly with north, south, east, and west. In those moments of silence, when the wind blows among the hills and the desert seems asleep, Hemunu feels the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He does not build for himself, nor even for Khufu. He builds for time. He knows that when the work is finished, he may no longer be there, but his name will be bound to the stone forever. His labor is not only technical, but moral, to ensure that the world's order remains unchanged, that the cosmos's harmony finds its reflection in perfect geometry. Each dawn brings new challenges. Blocks must fit with millimetric accuracy, ramps must be adjusted, measurements checked constantly. An error of a few degrees could throw the whole into misalignment. But the system works. The almost military organization keeps the project moving. Scribes record progress, priests bless milestones reached, and laborers celebrate each completed course with songs. The pyramid begins to rise, slowly, like a second mountain over the desert. From afar, the limestone's gleam beneath the sun makes it look like a fragment of solidified light. The inhabitants of Memphis can see it from the other side of the Nile, growing day by day, defying the horizon. Some kneel when they see it, convinced they are witnessing a miracle. Hemunu, however, knows there is no miracle, only calculation, sweat, and patience. Sometimes, as he reviews the progress from an elevated platform, he feels the air vibrate with a strange energy. Perhaps it is the heat, or perhaps something more. The sensation of taking part in a sacred act, lifting stone upon stone until reaching the sky, mastering matter to serve the spirit. That blend of rationality and mysticism defines Egypt's spirit. No mathematical formula, no modern compass, can fully separate the scientific precision from the religious fervor that guides its builders. For them, measuring is an act of faith, and every number a reflection of divine perfection. As years pass, the pyramid becomes a visible symbol of order and power. Its base seems to merge with the earth. Its summit points toward infinity. The desert, a silent witness, watches as human effort and a pharaoh's will turn into stone. And as the sun once more sets over the Giza Plateau, Hemunu lays his tablet on the table, wipes the sweat from his face, and watches the glow spill over the horizon. Much remains to be done, but the dream has taken shape. The sound of hammers echoes in the distance. The army of builders keeps growing, and soon human labor will become an unstoppable tide. The sun rises again over the Giza Plateau, and with it awakens an army that bears not weapons but tools. They are the Pharaoh's builders, thousands of men and women who each day transform the desert into a hive of life and purpose. From afar, the movement of this multitude looks like a river flowing through dust and stone. Some carry baskets of sand, others drag sleds, others knead bread or fill amphorae with water. Each fulfills a function within a perfectly meshed human machine. At the center of that organization is the idea of order and collaboration. Nothing is left to chance. Scribes move through the camps with clay tablets and reed brushes, noting rations, shifts, and relays. Foremen ensure each crew keeps pace, and supervisors, trained as junior architects, measure progress and report it to Hemiunu. At first glance, it might seem chaos, but in reality, it is a system as efficient as any army, with hierarchies, shifts, and defined responsibilities. Contrary to the old image of slavery, most workers were neither prisoners nor forced, but free peasants who came to the works during the season when the Nile flooded the fields. When the waters covered the farmland, no agricultural labor was possible, and the state used that time to call the populace to the great royal projects. There, instead of rest, they found sustenance, shelter, and the feeling of taking part in something transcendent. The builders received lodging in organized villages, with plotted streets and adobe houses roofed with palm branches. Some of those dwellings, unearthed centuries later by archaeologists, preserved remains of carbonized bread, pottery fragments, and cattle bones. Signs of a diet more varied than one might imagine. They ate barley bread, dried fish, dates, and thick beer, which was more nourishing than intoxicating. The state cared for them because it knew well-being kept the work's rhythm. At the complex's northern end rose granaries and storehouses where reserves of grain, oil, and dried meat were kept. Next to them, the stone workshops where artisans honed their copper tools, polished blocks, made ropes, and repaired transport sleds. The constant buzz of saws, the metallic strike of chisels, and the murmur of conversations composed a music of their own, a symphony accompanying the pulse of labor. Imagine walking those streets. Dust rises beneath your sandals. The smell of fresh-baked bread mingles with the smoke of hearths, and everywhere resounds the voices of foremen setting the rhythm. On the house walls are inscriptions with the work team's names. The Friends of Khufu, those who intoxicate the Pharaoh, the Lions of the Sun. Those names, written with humor and pride, reflect the humanity of those who took part in the work. They were not numbers in a ledger, but men with identity, camaraderie, and purpose. Each group of laborers worked under a standard, like a company within the army. They organized by specialty. Some cut stone, others transported it, others leveled the ground or guided the oxen that hauled the sleds. There were also doctors and veterinarians, tasked with caring for both men and animals. Injuries were common: cuts, dislocations, heat stroke. To treat them, they applied ointments with honey, resin, and herbs from the delta. Medical papyri found centuries later speak of surprisingly advanced knowledge, with specific cures for each ailment. Days pass beneath a merciless sun. In the central hours, the heat is so intense the air seems to ripple above the ground. Workers cover themselves with damp cloths, and water is distributed in large amphorae, carried on carts by young apprentices. Despite the hardship, the mood is not despair but endurance and routine. The Egyptians believed that work for the pharaoh held sacred value. Each chisel blow was a prayer, each placed block an offering to eternity. In the afternoons, when the sun begins to fall and shadows lengthen, the workers return home. They bathe in the canal, eat together, drink beer, sing, and tell stories. In the air remains a sense of community, of shared pride. On feast days, The pharaoh's musicians visit the camps, and the dances go on into the night. By torchlight, the desert's dust mingles with laughter and song. It is the well-earned rest of a people working for the greatest of purposes, to give shape to immortality. The pharaoh's presence, though distant, is constant. Royal envoys visit the works with offerings and decrees, reminding all that everything being raised belongs to Khufu's realm. In his name, food is distributed and progress blessed. Deep down, that collective devotion is what keeps the system in motion. No one works alone. All feel their effort forms part of a plan that transcends their lives. Hemiunu himself tours the camps from time to time. His presence commands respect, but also inspires confidence. He knows motivation is born of recognition. He often stops to speak with foremen, watches loaded sleds, and notes suggestions on his tablet. When something doesn't work, he analyzes it calmly, without needless punishments. He understands that human labor, like stone, needs balance and care to avoid fracturing. As months turn into years, the pyramid begins to grow. From the first courses, the work already casts a colossal shadow over the plateau. Blocks fit with astonishing precision. The access ramps stretch like snakes of hardened clay, and the echo of labor can be heard for kilometers. Travelers crossing the Nile at dusk see the structure rising on the horizon and gleaming under the setting sun's light. Many stop to watch it in silence, as if witnessing the birth of a new god. The army of builders raises not only stone, it also raises a symbol. Each day leaves traces, marked hands, footprints in the mud, fragments of broken tools. All this, centuries later, will allow archaeologists to reconstruct not only the technique, but also the daily life of the workers who made the miracle possible. In the nearby tombs, some of them were buried with honor, accompanied by amulets and small statuettes, a sign that their labor was recognized and valued. In this human anthill, something more than a pyramid is forged. A collective identity is forged, a national pride, the certainty that shared effort can overcome time. Every laborer, every architect, every priest praying on the Nile's bank forms part of a millimetric symphony that combines precision, strength, and faith. And though none can imagine it, their work will outlive empires and civilizations, outlast dust and oblivion. The sun falls once more, tinting the sky red. The men's shadows stretch over the sand, and the murmur of work slowly ceases. The desert's silence returns, as if all built during the day were paused until the next dawn. In the distance, the Nile reflects the last glimmers of light. The pyramid, still incomplete, seems to breathe beside them, growing in silence. When darkness covers the plateau, somewhere in the nearby quarry, the first hammer blow rings on freshly cut stone. The heartbeat of a new day is already beginning to awaken. Day breaks over the plateau with an almost unreal clarity. The air vibrates with the hum of thousands of voices, with the creak of wood, the hiss of taut ropes, and the steady strike of copper on stone. On the horizon, dust rises in fine columns that the wind scatters across the sky. Khufu's great project is no longer an idea on papyri, nor a trace upon the sand. It has begun to take shape, to rise inch by inch. The pyramid, still in its infancy, emerges from the ground as if waking from the desert's dream. The base is already finished, leveled with a precision that seems to defy time. Hemiunu, the chief architect, oversees the works from a wooden platform. He watches as laborers set the first courses of limestone, carefully cut to fit one another with barely any space between. Each block has been measured, polished, and adjusted with simple tools, yet guided by a technique refined over generations. Around him, scribes and foremen mark positions with red pigment, ensuring that every line follows the plan traced by the gods. The process is as meticulous as it is hypnotic. From nearby quarries, the stone blocks arrive, hauled on sleds that crawl slowly along tracks of moistened mud. The men pull the ropes with bodies leaning forward, while others with jars of water wet the ground to reduce friction. The damp sand turns compact, almost like a solid carpet over which the sled slides more easily. The technique, seemingly simple, requires coordination and strength. Each block weighs between 2 and 15 tons, and yet it moves, centimeter by centimeter, driven by the effort of dozens of men. When the sleds reach the foot of the work, a new team takes over. Using inclined ramps and wooden levers, they raise the block to the level where it must be set. The most skilled, the stone placers, adjust its final position with measured blows of wooden mallets. There is no haste, no needless noise. Everything moves with a restrained rhythm, almost ritual. In each block that locks in each line that completes, there is a sense of solemnity, of taking part in something larger than one's own effort. Imagine the sound. The dry thud of hammers, the squeal of wood under tension, the short orders that cut through the wind's hum. At times, the air vibrates with the laborers' chants, rhythmic melodies to coordinate their movements. The voices, mixed with the distant drum of the foreman, create a kind of ancestral music that accompanies the construction. It is a heartbeat that resonates across the desert, Egypt's heart beating to the tempo of stone. As the pyramid grows, so does its complexity. Hemiunu must constantly adjust calculations, the slope, the angle, the alignment with the cardinal points. Nothing can deviate by even a degree. The entire structure depends on exactness. The priests, for their part, continue daily rituals, convinced that each stone must be consecrated before it takes its place. The gods, they say, must inhabit the construction from the first moment, for only then will it become the Pharaoh's dwelling in eternity. The work continues without rest for years. The seasons follow one another. The Nile rises, floods the fields, recedes, and leaves the land fertile. Each agricultural cycle brings a new wave of laborers, replacing those who return to till their plots. Thus, the pyramid advances like a constant breathing, fed by Egypt's own rhythm. There is no day of inauguration, nor a single moment of start or pause. Only a continuous flow, a slow and perpetual transformation, where stone climbs and the desert turns into temple. Little by little, the lower courses begin to close and the structure rises toward the sky. Laborers, long used to working at ground level, now must ascend ramps that coil around the work. Each day, the ascent becomes longer and more arduous. The thinner air mixes with dust that floats like a golden veil under the sunlight. From on high, the view is overwhelming. The Nile gleams in the distance. The villages look like miniatures, and the horizon loses itself in a sea of endless sand. During breaks, some sit on still warm blocks and gaze upon the immensity. They know their lives unfold on the same stage, day after day, but they also know that what they build will not disappear with them. That awareness of permanence sustains them, drives them. The elders of the camp say the Pharaoh has promised them a place in the afterlife at his side, and many believe it. To work for Khufu is to work for eternity. In the nearby temples, priests make offerings to the god Ptah, patron of builders, and to the god Ra, the sun that illumines the work. Each sunset, when the sun settles on the horizon, its reddish light touches the highest blocks, igniting them as if they were alive. The laborers read it as a blessing. Ra himself approves their progress. The link between sky and earth is tangible. For them, the pyramid is not merely a tomb, but a sacred instrument, a channel that will unite the Pharaoh's soul with the stars. Meanwhile, Hemiunu reviews the plans for the interior. Chambers and passages begin to take shape within the stony mass. The sloping galleries, hidden corridors, and sealed rooms form a labyrinth of stone devised to protect the Pharaoh and guide his spirit on its journey to the beyond. Everything has a meaning. The angle of each passage, the orientation of each chamber, the position of vents aligned with the constellations. The pyramid, more than a tomb, is a machine of resurrection. The desert watches in silence. From afar, the growing monument looks like a newborn mountain held together by human will. On moonless nights, its silhouette stands against the firmament, and some swear they can see the stars seeming to bow over it, as if recognizing its form. Perhaps the gods, from their celestial abode, smile at the persistence of men. As the years pass, the upper courses begin to close the structure. The work becomes slower, more dangerous, more exhausting. The blocks must be lifted to ever greater heights, and the sleds creak under the weight. Many men have left their strength and their lives in the stone, yet the work does not stop. The pyramid keeps growing, ever closer to the sky, ever farther from the imaginable. And then, on any given day, when the sun lights the plateau at its zenith, Hemiunu looks down from above at the whole. At his feet, the pyramid rises majestic, and though much remains to complete it, its silhouette dominates the horizon. The pharaoh's dream has acquired body and volume. It is no longer a symbol nor a wish. It is a living presence, a mountain made by human hands. In the afternoon silence, as the wind strokes the newly set blocks, the architect feels something like vertigo. He understands that what they are building does not belong only to their time. The stone will endure centuries, and their names will be lost, but the work will remain. Eternity, he thinks, is nothing more than this: to leave marks so firm that not even the wind can erase them. Under the sun's glow, the air fills with a new murmur. The engineers begin to debate how to move the heaviest blocks to the heights, and the mystery of their technique is about to be revealed. The mystery begins in the quarry. There, under the merciless noonday sun, workers strike the rock with dolerite mauls, a stone harder than the limestone they extract. The echo of blows repeats across the hills, marking the pulse of an endless day. Each block, before becoming part of the Great Pyramid, must be separated, shaped, and hauled over kilometers. Only those who witness the process grasp the magnitude of that task. Moving hundreds of thousands of stones, each several tons, without iron, without wheels, without cranes, and with a precision that even modern machines struggle to replicate. In the quarry's depths, master stonecutters trace cut lines upon the bedrock. Following those grooves, they insert dry wooden wedges which, once wetted with water, expand and open cracks in the stone. With infinite patience, they repeat the process until the piece yields, detaching with a dry sound that resounds like a muffled thunderclap. Then, with wooden levers and braided linen ropes, the men free the block and drag it to the surface. The ground trembles beneath its weight. Each movement is an ancestral choreography, born of centuries of trial and observation. But the true challenge is not cutting them, it is moving them. From the Giza quarries, white limestone is taken straight to the site. But the red granite blocks destined for the inner chambers come from Aswan, over 800 kilometers to the south. How could they transport such colossi across desert and Nile? The answer lies in the collective intelligence of a people who understood the landscape as an ally, not an obstacle. During the river's floods, Egypt becomes an inland sea. Taking advantage of this natural phenomenon, the Egyptians open artificial canals connecting the quarries to the Nile. Upon them glide broad, flat wooden barges designed to bear immense loads. Each vessel carries one or two blocks, lashed with thick ropes, and rides the current to the harbors near the plateau. There, men unload the stones and haul them along specially prepared roads, covered with mud and damp sand. This technique, simple yet effective, is complemented by an ingenious detail rediscovered only in modern times: the use of water as a lubricant. The laborers poured water before the sleds to compact the sand, thus reducing friction and easing the slide. It was not magic but empirical physics. By wetting the ground, the sand ceased to scatter and became firmer, allowing the blocks to move with half the effort. That, confirmed centuries later by modern experiments, shows how deeply the ancient Egyptians grasped the principles of mechanics, though they never framed them in words. Picture the scene. A sled loaded with a stone the size of a small room inching along an inclined track. 50 men pull the ropes while others wet the sand with jars. Foremen set the rhythm with wooden staffs, striking the ground to keep time. From time to time, the sled stops. Then a group wedges rollers under the runners or adjusts the ropes. The air vibrates with shouts, gasps, and the groan of wood. In that collective effort, there is an almost musical precision. Each human force meshes with the next. Each gesture repeats with discipline. As the pyramid grows, distances within the work expand. The blocks must be lifted ever higher, and the ramps lengthen and twist around the structure. No one knows with certainty exactly how those ramps were built, and within that enigma lies much of the technical fascination of the Great Pyramid. Some Egyptologists believe there was a great frontal ramp extending from the base to the highest point, with a gentle incline. Others imagine spiral ramps encircling the pyramid, or systems of internal ramps hidden within the structure. Whatever the method, all agree that Giza's builders mastered applied geometry with admirable precision. They knew how to balance the block's weight, how to use counterweights and levers, how to set the angle to avoid fracturing the stone. Their knowledge was not theoretical, but profoundly practical. Each generation of laborers inherited the wisdom of the last, and learning was passed on as naturally as a chant or a rite. In the workshops near the site, artisans craft the tools needed for this challenge. Founders, smiths, and carpenters work without rest. They make mauls, levers, wedges, ropes, rudimentary pulleys, and wooden structures for the sleds. Everything must be sturdy, yet replaceable. Each week, supervisors check worn tools and replace them. In the scribes' ledgers appear notes about deliveries of copper and cedar wood brought from Lebanon, a resource so precious it is reserved only for the heaviest rigs. The sound of work mingles with ritual chants. Each block that ascends is accompanied by a prayer, an invocation to the gods who guard the craft. It is said that before placing the most important stones, priests poured lotus water and drew upon them the Ankh sign, symbol of life. For the Egyptians, every construction had a soul, and it had to be awakened. From above, Hemiunu surveys the immense network of ramps, roads, and canals spreading around him. To his eyes, the entire landscape has become a living machine. The Nile, the quarries, the villages, and the laborers form a single organism, a gigantic body whose heart beats to the rhythm of hammers. He knows he is witnessing a human miracle, thousands moving as one, driven by the Pharaoh's will and by a faith that binds them all. Days pass, and with them, the heaviest blocks climb to their destination. The ramps are constantly rebuilt, adapting to the pyramid's growth. As the monument gains height, the builders dismantle the lower sections and reuse the material. The structure itself seems to grow like a living being, renewing itself, feeding upon its own body. The younger workers tell stories by the fire, imagining the stones speak to each other, whispering the sky's secrets at night. To them, the pyramid is not a building. It is a sacred creature, a living hill that will grow until it touches the firmament. In the desert silence, beneath a sky studded with stars, that idea seems perfectly possible. When the day's last lights fade on the horizon, the sled's echoes wane. The pyramid stands against the sky with an ever sharper silhouette, its apex still distant, yet inevitable. The wind blows, carrying the smell of mud, sweat, and incense from nearby temples. All Egypt works in harmony, as if an invisible will were guiding every effort. The transport mystery is not only a matter of technique. It is a story of ingenuity, cooperation, and the human capacity to turn the impossible into the everyday. Each stone set carries not only tons, but generations of knowledge. Perhaps that is why, thousands of years later, the pyramid still inspires awe, not only for its size, but because within it beats the echo of that shared wisdom. The wind calms, and within the monument the first passageways begin to be traced. The architect's attention now turns toward the very entrails of the stone. While the sun lights the smooth faces of the growing pyramid, inside, far from the clamor of laborers and the wind's murmur, another work unfolds, quieter and more mysterious. It is there, under tons of stone, that Hemyunu and his team labor in the monument's secret heart, a space conceived not for human eyes, but for a god's soul. For that is, after all, what the Pharaoh represents. A divinity who has chosen to dwell among mortals and who, when his time comes, will ascend again to the sky. Within the structure, corridors open like veins inside a colossal body. Stonecutters carve sloping passageways that descend into the stone's entrails, and others that climb toward the upper chambers. The air is dense, saturated with the smell of dust and the rock's dampness. Torches crackle, casting shifting shadows upon freshly hewn walls. In here, the desert sound dies away. Only the rhythmic strike of hammers, the scrape of metal on stone, and the deep murmur of men working by firelight can be heard. Hemyunu, bent over a papyrus spread on a slab, studies the plans of the inner labyrinth. He knows the monument's success depends not only on its outer form, but on the interior's symbolic precision. Every passage, every chamber, every angle has a spiritual and mathematical purpose. There is no improvisation. The descending corridor, aligned to the north, points to a region of the sky where the imperishable stars lie, those that never set, symbols of the Pharaoh's eternity. The ascending corridor, by contrast, leads to the Queen's chamber and the King's chamber, the sacred spaces where the monarch's soul will be reborn among the gods. The work is slow and painstaking. To open the passageways, the stonecutters use dolerite hammers, copper picks, and cords dusted with quartz powder to cut granite blocks with precision. Each stone must fit the next without any fissure, so that the assembly's pressure keeps the structure sound for centuries. At times, the workers labor on their knees, bodies bent in tunnels barely wide enough to crawl. Darkness envelops them, and only the faint light of oil lamps marks the boundary between man and rock. In the sloping corridors, relieving blocks are set, enormous pieces of granite that distribute the pyramid's weight to the sides, preventing the chambers from collapsing under pressure. It is a technique so advanced that modern engineers still marvel at its effectiveness. Above the King's chamber, for example, 5 horizontal spaces act as relieving chambers. Between them lie granite beams hewn with millimetric precision, capable of bearing more than 4,000 tons of weight. This is not merely engineering. It is pure art, functional art, born of an instinctive grasp of natural laws. As the passages bore into the pyramid, the silence grows nearly absolute. Workers labor in small groups, in shifts that alternate day and night. Some leave marks upon the walls, team symbols, crew names, even small prayers written in red pigment. These are traces never meant to be seen, private messages that time, generous, has preserved. In them beats an unexpected humanity, jokes, invocations, pleas to the gods that the stone not break. The air inside the corridors is stifling. To ventilate it, the architects open narrow ducts that lead to the outside, aligned with the stars of Orion and the Great Bear. At first glance, they seem simple vents, but in truth they are cosmic bridges, channels along which the Pharaoh's spirit will travel toward the sky. In the Egyptian view, death was not an end, but a transition. The body remained in the tomb, but the soul had to find its path among the constellations. Each tunnel, Each chamber was part of that symbolic journey. When the king's chamber begins to take shape, the atmosphere turns solemn. The granite slabs, polished until they reflect the torchlight, shed a reddish sheen. In the center rises the sarcophagus, carved from a single piece and set in place before the chamber's access is closed. There will be no way to remove it later. Hemiunu personally supervises its placement, measuring the exact orientation with a cord. Its interior will remain empty for now, awaiting the pharaoh's body. But even empty, the place already emanates a different energy, a blend of silence and power. Outside, the world keeps its rhythm. The sun rises and falls, the ramps grow, the laborers sing. But here inside, time seems halted. Everything that happens within the pyramid bears the taste of the eternal. Priests visit the chambers at precise moments in the solar calendar, lighting incense and reciting formulas that none outside the temple understand. Every word, every gesture, seeks to awaken life in the stone. Imagine walking those corridors. The light flickers, shadows lengthen, and the air grows cooler as you descend. The walls, smooth and mute, seem to absorb sounds. There is a sense of instinctive respect, almost fear, as if the space itself were alive. Perhaps this is what the workers felt, aware they were entering a place where man and God meet. Months turn into years. The pyramid rises skyward and deepens inward. The oldest laborers say the monument now has a soul, that it breathes and vibrates with the wind's passage. Sometimes at nightfall, when the echoes of work fade, some swear they hear a murmur in the galleries, as if the stones were speaking among themselves. Perhaps it is air moving through the ducts, or perhaps, as the priests believe, it is the voices of ancestors watching over the work. At last, the passageways are sealed, the chambers closed, and the entrances disguised beneath new layers of stone. Only the priests know the accesses and the rituals to perform when the time for burial comes. From the outside, no one would suspect that beneath that perfect surface beats a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, carefully devised to guide the pharaoh on his final journey. On the day Hemiunu inspects the king's chamber for the last time, the silence is total. He lays his hand upon the cold stone and feels its deep vibration, as if eternity already rested within. He knows his work inside is complete, that the pyramid's heart beats in harmony with the cosmos. What remains to be done lies now outside, where the stone's brilliance must reach its final form. As he emerges, the desert's warm air strikes him hard. The contrast between the inner darkness and the sun's blinding light forces him to close his eyes. Behind him lies the silent chamber that will one day receive the pharaoh. Before him, the immensity of the monument that still keeps growing. And as the sun descends over Giza, the priest's murmur blends with the wind's song. The ceremonies are being prepared, for the gods are already watching closely the work that rises toward them. Over the Giza Plateau, the sun falls straight down, without shadows. The pyramid now stands imposing, its structure complete, though still bare, without the white stone mantle that will soon make it blaze. From a distance, it seems a natural mountain, but as one draws closer, the perfect order of its lines is revealed. The precision of its angles, the geometric purity that only a mind obsessed with balance could conceive. All Egypt pauses to contemplate it, peasants, priests, scribes, and artisans. No other monument has achieved such harmony between earth and sky. From this moment on, the work ceases to be purely physical. Around the pyramid unfolds a deeper, invisible dimension, directed by the priests of the solar temple and the guardians of the funerary cult. They are the true keepers of the work's ultimate meaning. Those who interpret the signs, who recite the hymns, who give a name to each stone and to every wind's direction. Without them, the pyramid would be only a set of immense blocks. With them, it becomes a bridge between worlds, the axis that connects the cosmos's order with the human order. The priests of Heliopolis, experts in astronomy and ritual, arrive in linen tunics and shaven heads, bringing scrolls covered with sacred formulas. At dawn, when the sun barely peeks over the horizon, they climb to the monument's base and perform ceremonies to invoke Ra, the sun god, and Thoth, lord of wisdom. They chant in an archaic language that resounds among the stones as if time itself were answering. In their hands they bear small figures of gods, amulets, and lotus flowers, which they leave at the pyramid's corners as offerings. The work is almost finished, but each day a new rite is celebrated. In Egypt, the act of building is also an act of faith. It is not enough to raise stone upon stone. The monument's spirit must be awakened. The priests walk the ramps, mark symbols on the blocks, and pour wine and milk into the cracks as food for the gods. They insist that, with each gesture, the pyramid fills with life, and that Ra's energy, trapped within its geometry, will protect the pharaoh beyond death. Hemiunu watches all this with a blend of wonder and calm. He knows the most technical part of his work has ended, but he also understands that another construction now begins, subtler and more eternal, that of meaning. The prayers, the rituals, the symbolic offerings are how men seal their work before the gods' eyes. The pyramid no longer belongs only to humans. It is the sky's property. Around it, the funerary complex begins to take shape. Temples, walls, access ramps, altars, and processional avenues are built to link the pyramid with the Nile Valley. The priests in charge of Khufu's funerary cult supervise these works with almost bureaucratic precision. Everything must be in place for the moment when the pharaoh leaves his mortal body and begins his journey toward the western horizon. Nights are different now. The laborers' chants and the strike of tools are no longer heard. Only the wind. At times, the glow of torches breaks the darkness, lighting the monument's apex. There, the temple guardians perform stellar rites, observing the movements of Orion and Sirius. For them, the stars are gods in transit, and the pyramid, an instrument that allows the pharaoh to join them. Each alignment, each measure, each angle is conceived to mirror that dialogue between heaven and earth. During the nocturnal ceremonies, whispered prayers are heard, drums marking eternity's pulse. The air fills with the aroma of sacred oils and myrrh incense. The priests, wrapped in penumbra, raise their hands to the stars, repeating the words of the Book of the Dead, which has not yet been written, but already exists in oral tradition. Rise, O Pharaoh, and ascend with the gods. Take your place among them. May the sky receive you, and the earth remember you. As the rites proceed, the people carry on with life. Peasants work the fields renewed by the Nile. Merchants travel between cities. Artisans raise lesser temples. The pyramid, silent, watches them all. Its presence has become part of landscape and thought. It is a constant reminder of the pharaoh's power and of the promise of eternity that guides Egyptian existence. No one dares pass near without bowing the head or leaving an offering. The respect it inspires is not imposed, it is felt. In time, the laborers who took part in the construction begin to depart. Their villages empty little by little. Some settle near the temples, becoming guardians or servants of the cult. Others return to their lands with stories to tell their children. Stories of a sun that never set over Giza, of a pharaoh who dreamt of the sky, of a monument so vast it seemed impossible men had raised it. Thus the legend is born. Hemiunu grows old watching the result of his life. From his house, he can see the limestones gleam at sunset. He knows the final cladding will soon be set. Thousands of perfectly polished blocks that will turn the pyramid into a mirror of the sun. Under that light, the structure will seem alive, like a petrified flame. Perhaps that is how the gods choose to recognize themselves in the work of men. The priests continue their labor, unceasing. They are the guardians of time, those who must keep the cult and the memory. Each dawn they repeat the foundational prayers. Each solstice they renew the offerings. At each eclipse they read the omens the heavens inscribe. The pyramid becomes the most perfect calendar ever built. Its shadow marks the seasons. Its orientation points to the sun's eternal course. For the Egyptians, time does not pass. It repeats, like Ra's daily journey across the firmament. The pyramid guarantees that cycle will not break. And so, while the stone remains unmoving, life keeps turning around it. On quiet nights, when the air cools and the stars glitter over the plateau, one can imagine priests crossing the temple courtyards with their torches, murmuring prayers that blend with the wind. In that ancient silence, the pyramid seems to listen, keeping every word, every echo, every human intent. Khufu still lives, though his body yet breathes. His soul, the priests say, has already begun the journey toward divinity. The pyramid waits for him, patient, perfect, immortal. Everything is prepared: the temples, the roots, the offerings, the secret formulas. Only the final act is missing, the one that will turn stone into sepulchre and the sepulchre into eternity. When the horizon reddens and the Nile reflects the day's last light, a messenger departs for Memphis with a solemn announcement. The Pharaoh has fallen ill, and the gods at last claim what is theirs. 9. The Pharaoh's sunset. The air of Memphis grows heavy, thick, as if time itself had stopped. In the courtyards of the royal palace, servants walk in silence, and the torches burn with a dimmer light than usual. News has spread like a hushed rumor: Khufu is ill. The living god who ordered the Great Pyramid to be raised lies on his bed, weakened by years, surrounded by priests, physicians, and scribes who record each breath, each word. Outside, the city waits in reverent silence. Egypt, a land accustomed to the eternal cycle of life and death, knows it is about to witness its sovereign's passage into eternity. Inside the palace, the pharaoh speaks scarcely. His eyes, veiled by age, still hold that ancient gleam that commanded respect and devotion. Around him, the air smells of incense, myrrh, and lotus oil. The physicians of the temple of Sekhmet apply unguents to his skin, while the priests recite formulas meant to strengthen his ka, the vital spirit. Khufu listens in silence, with the serenity of one who knows his destiny is fulfilled. His gaze, more than on the present, seems fixed elsewhere, upon the desert, where the pyramid he commanded awaits him, shining beneath the sun. On the cooler nights, he asks that the curtains of his chamber be opened to contemplate the sky. There, the stars of Orion and the Great Bear gleam brightly, the same that inspired the layout of his tomb. Perhaps he wonders whether his soul will recognize the path, whether the formulas inscribed on funerary papyri will suffice to guide him. Perhaps he feels a mix of pride and melancholy, pride for having materialized the boldest dream of his civilization, and melancholy in understanding that no monument, however immense, can hold life back. Meanwhile, Egypt's temples begin the rites of passage. From Heliopolis to Thebes, the priests chant prayers to the god Ra, asking him to illuminate the pharaoh's way. The banks of the Nile fill with offerings: papyrus flowers, golden statuettes, sacred birds, jars of wine and bread. It is a tribute that flows like the river itself, a collective gesture uniting the entire people in a single emotion: gratitude toward the man who turned their faith into stone. When at last Khufu exhales his final breath, the silence is absolute. The sun has just risen, and its light enters the chamber like a sign. The priests bow, touch their foreheads to the floor, and recite the words of passage. The pharaoh has died, and yet has not died. His body rests, but his spirit ascends. Ra receives him. Osiris welcomes him, and his name shall be eternal. Then begins the ceremony of embalming, the process that will ensure the pharaoh's body can serve as a dwelling for his soul in the hereafter. For 70 days, the Anubian priests, masked as jackals, work in silence in the temple of mummification. They remove the organs, purify them with oils, and place them in canopic jars adorned with the faces of the sons of Horus. The heart, symbol of thought and conscience, is left in place, for it will be weighed before the gods in the final judgment. The body is covered with natron, wrapped in linen, and anointed with aromatic resins. Each bandage is accompanied by a prayer, each layer by a protective spell. During that time, the pyramid is prepared to receive him. At the base, the priests clean the courtyards, polish the altars, and adorn the temple walls with reliefs that recount the pharaoh's life, his ascent to the throne, his conquests, his offerings to the gods. Within, the chambers are filled with objects that will accompany the king in eternity. Chests of jewels, ceremonial weapons, amulets, food, furniture, and miniature boats for sailing the celestial river. Nothing is left to chance. Even the smallest detail has a symbolic purpose. When the appointed day arrives, the funeral cortege departs from Memphis toward Giza. It is a spectacle of solemnity and beauty that Egypt will never forget. Hundreds of priests march at the front, bearing standards and torches. Behind them, musicians play melancholy melodies on flutes and harps, while women dressed in white weep by the roadside. At the cortege's center, the coffin of gold and sacred wood rests upon a linen-covered sled, drawn by oxen adorned with flowers. As it passes, the people bow and cast lotus petals upon the ground. The journey lasts hours. The sun advances slowly, and its light reflects upon the limestone casing of the pyramid, making it shine as though it were made of fire. When the cortege reaches the base of the monument, the priests halt their march. Silence reigns once more. There, beneath the noonday sun, the last ceremony is performed, the opening of the mouth. Through this ritual, the priests touch the mummy's lips and eyes with a chisel, symbolically restoring speech, sight, and breath. It is the moment when death transforms into rebirth. Afterward, the coffin is slowly brought into the pyramid. Torches light the passageways for the last time. The sound of footsteps and chants is muffled in the galleries. The procession advances to the king's chamber, where the granite sarcophagus awaits. The pharaoh's body is laid within, surrounded by amulets, flowers, and statuettes. The priests intone the final formulas, seal the stone doors, and leave in silence. One by one, the corridors are blocked with slabs that will never move again. Outside, the sun descends slowly. The pyramid, now complete and silent, rises like an unmoving beacon over the desert. At its apex, the white casing reflects the day's last rays, staining the sky with gold and crimson. The people watch in silence, knowing that the pharaoh is no longer among them, yet that his presence will remain forever in the stone. In that instant, the Great Pyramid ceases to be a work under construction to become what it was always destined to be, a temple of eternity. In the nights that follow, the priests light torches in the valley temples. The fire burns without fading for days, a symbol of the pharaoh's journey to the beyond. According to belief, Khufu now crosses the subterranean realm of Osiris, sails the river of stars, and rises beside Ra in his solar bark. The pyramid, with its chambers and passageways, acts as a cosmic compass, guiding his soul northward, where the imperishable stars never set. In the desert silence, everything seems to pause. The work is fulfilled. The pharaoh has ascended, and his name will be etched in time as surely as his monument. The men who served him age and die, but the symbol remains, intact, awaiting the visit of wind and centuries. And as the sand slowly covers the cortege's traces, a new dawn lights the neighboring pyramids. Other kings, inspired by Khufu's example, begin to dream of their own ascent to the sky. The desert wind blows softly over the Giza Plateau, sweeping grains of sand that whirl in golden spirals under the morning light. The Great Pyramid rises immobile, majestic, its surface still intact, gleaming beneath the sun as if it were a fragment of solidified light. The body of Khufu rests within, sealed forever between granite walls. Yet his name, his symbol, and his vision stretch beyond the tomb. All Egypt breathes beneath the shadow of his legacy. Few years have passed since his death, and the kingdom continues its course, guided by the administrative machinery he consolidated. The power of the Pharaoh, that almost divine concept that Khufu brought to its highest expression, remains the axis supporting the order of the two lands. The temples continue to function. The scribes record tributes. Caravans cross the desert bearing copper, incense, and alabaster. But something has changed. The pyramid, that miracle of stone, has become a point of reference, not only physical, but spiritual. It is the measure of time, the mirror of power, and the symbol of an idea no man will ever fully equal. The throne passes to his son Khafra, who grew up in the shadow of his father's colossal creation. From youth he understood that the legacy he inherited was not only political, but cosmic. His duty was not merely to rule over men, but to maintain the harmony of the universe that Khufu had left in balance. And like any heir marked by greatness, Khafra feels the need to continue the dream, to ensure the pharaoh's memory does not dissolve into the sands of time. Thus begins the tale of Giza's second guardian. Khafra orders the construction of his own pyramid, a monument that will rise beside his father's, slightly smaller, yet erected with a similar purpose. To reflect the continuity of the dynasty and the sacred bond between the pharaoh and the son. The architects, trained in Hemyunu's school, adapt the techniques perfected in Khufu's time. The ramps, the sleds, the calculations, and the rituals repeat, but now with a different tone. It is no longer about conquering the impossible, but about paying homage to the order already revealed. At the foot of Khafra's pyramid, a new stone guardian arises, the Great Sphinx, carved directly from the plateau's living rock. Its face, serene and enigmatic, looks eastward, awaiting each day's dawn. Its lion's body symbolizes the pharaoh's strength, its human face, the wisdom that governs that strength. Some believe it was conceived as a representation of Khafra himself. Others think it is a symbol of solar power. Whatever its origin, the Sphinx becomes the silent guardian of the pyramids, the unmoving witness to the passage of ages. Khafra's funerary complex reflects the perfection of the inherited order. His pyramid appears taller than Khufu's, though it is not. The elevated ground on which it stands creates the illusion of superiority. It is a subtle gesture, a way to affirm continuity without rivalry. The son honors the father, yet also ensures his own name is etched alongside his in history. Meanwhile, the Egyptian people contemplate the two pyramids as if they were twin mountains on the horizon, dwellings of the gods. The priests teach that when the sun descends at dusk, it passes through the space between them, entering the underworld to be reborn at dawn. Giza thus becomes the stage for an eternal drama, the cycle of day and night, of life and death, of the cosmos's perpetual rebirth. Years pass, and after Khafra comes Menkaure, Khufu's grandson. His character is different, more pious, closer to the people. Under his reign, the pyramids reach their last golden phase. His monument, smaller than the previous ones, does not seek to surpass his predecessors in size, but in beauty. The rosy granite casing that covers its base glows under the sun with a warmth that contrasts with the pure white of the others. His pyramid is a hymn to human proportion within the immensity of the legacy. Menkaure represents the closing of a cycle. With him, the age of the Great Pyramids comes to an end. Egypt has reached the summit of its technical and symbolic power, and Khufu's dynasty has left an indelible mark on history. None of his successors will build anything comparable again. Future generations will prefer temples, obelisks, and rock-cut tombs, works more intimate and spiritual, yet less grand. Even so, Giza's echo will remain forever as the standard of perfection. For Egyptians of the centuries that follow, Khufu's pyramid becomes time's point zero, the axis around which memory turns. The priests of Ra consider it a physical manifestation of the sun god himself, a mountain of light where the pharaoh continues to be reborn each day. Even peasants, as they plow their fields, lift their eyes toward Giza and murmur prayers. It matters not that the builders' names fade or that dynasties change. The pyramid remains, immune to the passing of time, like a halted breath. Imagine that horizon. 3 pyramids aligned, reflecting the dawn over the desert. At their feet, the Sphinx watches the returning sun, day after day, century after century. The kings who commanded their construction have vanished, but their works still stand, as if they were still guarding the world's order. Giza becomes a sanctuary of time, a place where past and present blur, where death seems a form of life. Hemiunu is long dead, and with him disappears the generation of men who raised the first Great Pyramid. Yet his legacy continues in the architects and priests, who teach new generations the art of measuring, aligning, balancing the cosmos with stone. Egypt has understood that immortality is achieved not by faith or force alone, but by knowledge. Each stone set, each calculation drawn, is a way of approaching the universe's mystery. Centuries will pass, and the desert sands will partly cover temples, causeways, and workers' villages. But the pyramids will remain, upright, defying the elements. They will be visited by kings, conquerors, and travelers from distant lands. Some will admire them, others will fear them. And although their meanings will change with time, their presence will evoke the same sensation, the certainty that once humankind looked to the sky and built something that reached it. Khufu's lineage will fade, but his imprint will remain in stone. Future generations will speak of him not only as a pharaoh, but as the man who turned eternity into visible form. And when the echo of his name fades among the sands, other voices, centuries later, will awaken the mystery once more, seeking in its stones the answers time chose not to reveal. Time, that invisible sculptor, begins to work slowly over the Giza Plateau. Centuries pass like the wind that brushes the stones, erasing traces, blurring paths, yet failing to bend the perfect form of the Colossus. What was once the throbbing heart of Khufu's realm becomes a silent landscape, covered by desert dust and the nostalgia of ancient splendor. Yet even in silence, the pyramid still speaks. Its voice resonates in every era, adapting to new ears, new beliefs, new tongues. During the Middle Kingdom, many centuries after Khufu's death, pharaohs still look to Giza as one gazes upon a god's face. Though their own tombs are now built in more discreet places, carved into the rocks of the Valley of the Kings, the shadow of Egypt's greatest monument still stretches over the entire civilization. Priests keep the solar cult alive, pilgrims leave offerings at the pyramid's feet, and scribes copy ancient texts that extol Khufu's name as he who mastered time. With the arrival of the new kingdom, Egypt opens to the world. The Theban pharaohs, like Ramesses and Thutmose, raise monumental temples in honor of the gods, yet none can rival the mathematical purity of Giza. Egyptian art has evolved, religion has been refined, but the pyramids remain as mute witnesses to an earlier, almost mythical time. Priests call them the mountains of creation, symbols of the primordial hill from which life emerged. Even in the temples of Karnak and Luxor, architects echo their triangular form in obelisks, as though every later monument wished silently to recall its origin. As centuries pass, desert winds begin to cover the lesser temples surrounding the pyramids. The workers' villages disappear beneath the sand. Only the main stone endures, immobile, perfect, unaltered. Grains of sand brush its surface like a natural clock, marking the millennia's passage. The white gleam of the limestone casing, which once mirrored the sun, begins to fade, worn down by erosion and later by human hands that strip it away to build new cities. In the times of the Persians and the Greeks, Giza becomes an enigma. Foreign travelers who reach Egypt are awed by the pyramid's size and age. None can imagine how they were raised. The local priests, keen to preserve the mystery, offer symbolic and mythic versions. They say the gods taught men the secrets of stone, that stars descended from heaven to mark the design. Technical knowledge has been lost, but wonder remains intact. When Herodotus visits Egypt in the 5th century before Christ, he writes about Khufu's pyramid with a blend of fascination and doubt. In his accounts, influenced by what the priests tell him, Khufu appears as a despotic monarch, a man who enslaved his people to raise his tomb. Though that version is far from the truth, his testimony leaves a lasting mark on the Western imagination. From then on, the pyramid becomes a symbol of grandeur and mystery, but also of absolute power. The Romans, centuries later, approach Giza with the same admiration. Some emperors, like Hadrian, visit the plateau and carve their names on the stones, unable to resist the urge to leave their mark upon eternity. Travelers speak of hidden tunnels, secret chambers, and unreachable treasures. Rumors spread of curses and unseen guardians, while merchants sell fragments of stone as sacred relics. Myth has overtaken knowledge, yet the pyramid remains, impassive, indifferent to the tales men weave around it. With the coming of Christianity and Islam, the pyramid's spiritual meaning changes, but does not vanish. Early Christian monks, withdrawn to the desert, see it as a symbol of human pride punished by God. Muslim sages, centuries later, interpret it as a stony library, an ark of ancient knowledge. Some Arab chroniclers, like al-Masudi or al-Idrisi, claim that the secrets of the universe are kept within, inscriptions written before the flood. Others believe it was built by the prophet Idris, whom the Hebrews would call Enoch. Again, the pyramid changes its face to suit the thought of its time. Through the medieval centuries, adventurers and plunderers try to penetrate its interior, convinced it holds incalculable treasures. In the year 820, Caliph al-Mamun orders a tunnel dug into its north face. After weeks of labor, his men open a passage into the original corridors, but what they find is not riches, but ancient silence, an echo of stone that seems to mock their greed. There is no gold or gems there, only the solemn emptiness of time. The true wealth was, as ever, in the mystery. In modern centuries, the pyramid becomes an object of scientific study and admiration. 18th century European travelers measure it, draw it, study it with instruments and theories. Some seek sacred proportions. Others think they see in its measures the code of the universe. In the 19th century, archaeologists begin to excavate with more rigorous methods. They discover workers' villages, tools, ramps, and crew graffiti. Little by little, the legend of slaves fades, and the true story emerges, that of an organized, intelligent, devout people who raised a mountain of stone through faith and knowledge. Even so, despite all that science reveals, the pyramid preserves something inexplicable. Whoever stands before it feels a mix of humility and awe. Its proportions are so exact, its scale so beyond human, that it is hard to believe it was built by human hands. Perhaps that is its greatest lesson, to remind each generation what humankind can achieve when reason is joined to purpose. And so, across the centuries, the pyramid has passed from tomb, temple, oracle, library, and enigma to what it is today, a mirror of humanity. In its blocks are reflected all eras, all interpretations, all the questions man has asked about himself. No matter from which culture or creed it is contemplated, it always returns the same sensation, that of standing before something that transcends time. When night falls over Giza, and the desert winds caress the ancient stones, the lights of Cairo flicker in the distance, like a new human firmament. The pyramid remains silent, watching civilizations pass before it, one after another, like fleeting shadows. Its worn edges still keep the shape of the original dream, and beneath the moon it seems to glow with an inner light, the same that once guided Khufu's soul to the stars. And as darkness wraps the desert, the sky fills with constellations, the same sky that thousands of years ago inspired men to raise in stone the reflection of the eternal. Night falls over the plateau, slow, almost solemn. The day's heat dissolves into the air, and the sky ignites with thousands of points of light that seem to breathe in unison. Where the desert meets the horizon, the Great Pyramid emerges like a perfect shadow, an unmoving geometry that cuts the firmament. All around it falls silent. Only the wind whispers among the ancient blocks, carrying echoes of voices that no longer exist. More than 4 millennia have passed since Khufu's men set the last stone. Yet in this nocturnal stillness, it seems time has not passed. The stars that watch today's visitors are the same that guided Hemiunu in his calculations, the same that the priests invoked to open the Pharaoh's path to eternity. In Giza, the sky has never changed. Only men have. The guides who cross the plateau with their lanterns barely light the weathered edges of the stone. Each block, blackened by centuries, seems to guard a story. Here and there, fragments of inscriptions, quarry marks, traces carved into rock. They are minimal tracks of a human epic that remains alive in the world's imagination. For the pyramid does not belong to the past, it belongs to memory. It is the symbol of a question humanity keeps asking. How did they manage to raise the impossible? Modern science has answered many of those doubts. We know how the blocks were quarried, how they were moved, how they were aligned with a precision that astonishes even with today's technology. We know they were not slaves, but free citizens moved by faith, duty, and collective pride. But there is something archaeology cannot measure, the inner impulse that led those men to defy the limits of their time. That invisible force, that conviction that human effort could reach divine order, remains Giza's true mystery. Imagine for a moment that you are there, standing before the pyramid in the middle of the night. The wind blows softly, and the air holds that dry scent of the desert mixed with the freshness of the nearby Nile. You raise your eyes, and the monument's apex seems to touch the stars. There is a feeling hard to describe, a blend of smallness and wonder, of humility before permanence. Centuries, dynasties, empires, everything has passed, but the pyramid still stands, as if it held in its form the promise of eternity. In the distance, Cairo's lights flicker like a new human firmament. They are the modern stars, reflection of another civilization that, without knowing it, lives under the shadow of the same dream, to endure. From the city's balconies, thousands look toward Giza each night, unaware they behold the same horizon that once inspired the astronomers of Heliopolis. It is an invisible thread that binds present to past, a silent continuity only Egypt seems fully to understand. The pyramids are not just monuments. They are instruments of time. In their angles and proportions lies a grasp of the universe that still surprises us. The inclination of their faces reproduces the angle at which the sun's rays descend upon the horizon. Their orientation points precisely to true north, an achievement that would take centuries in other civilizations. It is as though the ancient Egyptians had deciphered part of the cosmos's language and carved it in stone so it would never be lost. And yet, the most moving thing about the pyramid is not its size or accuracy, but its humanity. Each block was cut, transported, and set by hands that no longer exist, by men and women who believed their work was part of something greater than themselves. None of their names reached us, save a few scrawled in hidden chambers, but their work speaks for all. It is the anonymous voice of humanity striving to leave a mark. In the night's silence, one can imagine Hemunu, the architect, standing in the same place, contemplating his creation under the stars. Perhaps, on his last visit, before sands covered the paths and centuries erased names, he felt what any person feels who looks upon it today, the certainty that human time is brief, but the act of creating can be eternal. The wind blows harder. Grains of sand strike the stone like a natural clock that never stops turning. Sometimes archaeologists say the desert does not destroy, it only hides. Perhaps that is why the pyramid has survived, because time chose not to erase it, only to protect it. It is a refuge of memory, a mountain made of faith and knowledge. Around it, the other pyramids and the Sphinx complete the landscape. Together they form a sacred triangle, an alignment that obeys not only geometry but also a deep idea, the union of sky, earth, and man. Each represents a stage of the human journey toward transcendence. Khufu dreamed of the absolute. Khafra consolidated continuity. Menkaure remembered fragility. 3 generations, 3 visions of the same longing, to overcome time. Cultures change, languages are forgotten, religions reinvent themselves. But the question remains. Why do we keep looking at the pyramids with the same fascination as travelers of antiquity? Perhaps because, deep down, we still recognize in them something of our own, that unshakable desire to leave a trace, to build something that outlives us. In the end, the pyramid is not merely a pharaoh's monument. It is the portrait of all humanity striving to rise. On the horizon, Orion shines, exactly where the ancients said the pharaoh's soul rested. The stars keep their course, unchanging, repeating the same journey each night. Below, on earth, the pyramid keeps its vigil. It is the same dialogue that began more than 40 centuries ago. Stone gazing at the sky, man seeking his reflection in the stars. When dawn begins to show, the sun's first light caresses the monument's apex. The day's gold spreads slowly down its faces, and the pyramid wakes again, as if breathing with the sun. In that instant, one understands what the Egyptians always knew, that each day is a resurrection, that life and eternity are not opposed, but repeat in an endless cycle. Thus ends our journey through Khufu's Great Pyramid, not as an ending, but as a return. For all that is born of man, if built with wisdom and purpose, remains. Stone, wind, light, the echo of human labor, all blend into a single sigh that crosses the millennia. And as the sun rises over Giza, the shadows dissolve, and the pyramids shine once more as in ancient times, reminding us, in silence, that true power lies not in conquering the world, but in understanding the place we hold within it. The wind keeps blowing over the plateau. The day begins, and the mystery continues. We have traveled together through time, following the traces of those who set stone upon stone to reach the stars. Perhaps now, as the desert's echo dissolves into the night, you feel the same calm that Giza keeps beneath its eternal sky. Tell me what impression this journey to the heart of history has left you with, and rest. Good night.